this is the best part about campaigning. So I want to applaud you for the great work you're doing, and thank you very much for coming out here. So I'm going to introduce myself, give you some background information that you may or may not know because I'm not from this area. So I was born in Laredo, Texas. Raised in Corpus Christi and moved to the Rio Grande Valley in 1988 after attending UT Law School and U of H Law Center, and got a job in the Valley where I raised both my kids and have been there since 1988. In 2006, I ran for the 13th Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals of the 13th Court is the South Texas portion of the Court of Appeals. I know that y'all have an amazing justice running for the 3rd Court of Appeals, Diane Henson. Yay! Who's a dear friend of mine and I adore. Her and I actually got elected at the same time in 2006, so we went to baby judges school. And my heart broke when we lost her, but we can fix that problem on November 4th, and so I'm very excited about that. So I got elected in 2006 and did get reelected in 2012. And so the Court of Appeals sits both in the Edinburgh area, which is Hidalgo County, and it sits in Corpus Christi. And so it's a perfect job for me because it's where I work, but it's also where my mom is in Corpus Christi, and we have homes that we go back and forth. So I want to introduce somebody that's very important. My husband is back there. Sam, raise your hand. Someone take it off picture. And Sam and I got married January 18th, and we started campaigning January 19th. So you're our honeymoon. So thank you very much. I told him it was part of the vows when he said, "I do, and you will campaign with me through the whole state." And he's loving every minute of it. A lot of work. I don't think he realized how big the state was until he started campaigning with me. So let me tell you what I've done and why I am the most qualified person for this job, hands down. I'm not tooting my own horn. It's just the way it is on paper. First of all, as I said, I've been elected twice as a judge, and I have been on the appellate court now for 7 years and have written over 800 opinions. My opponent has never been elected to any position, more so even ever been a judge. I think that experience on our high court for the Texas Supreme Court is important, don't you?
Yes. That's right.
Okay. So let's start with, I've been a judge and he hasn't. So he was appointed by the governor when there was an open seat. He was Governor Perry's chief of staff. And in all due respect, he was the one interviewing for these positions and then ended up giving himself his own position. I'm not sure how that all worked, but so be it. He is now on our Texas Supreme Court. But I will take him on page by page, over 800 opinions. You know, when you ask what your Supreme Court and what your philosophy is, you don't have to speculate with me. I tell them there are pages and pages of opinions that I have written on all aspects of the law if you want to know what kind of judge I am. Because I've written on every issue that comes before the Supreme Court as a Court of Appeals justice. And I have showed already the whole state of Texas what kind of judge I am. And I say the whole state because the 13th Court of Appeals is what we technically call a transfer-in court. The Supreme Court equalizes the dockets among all the Court of Appeals so that one doesn't get overburdened over another. And the 13th Court of Appeals is what's called a transfer-in, which means we get cases from other Court of Appeals, which means I have written for the Austin Court of Appeals. I have sat at the 3rd Court of Appeals on numerous occasions. We have sat at the Houston Court of Appeals, both the 4th and the 14th. We have sat in Beaumont as a Court of Appeals several times, and we have sat in Fort Worth in Tarrant County as a Court of Appeals. So I literally have written opinions for the whole state of Texas. And I think that that's what a Supreme Court justice should have done, right? I think that one of the other things that as a Supreme Court Justice you need to have besides experience is a leadership quality. We're talking about the highest court in the state of Texas, one that has significant impacts upon you and your children and your parents and your neighbors and the issues that are important to us in this room. So what have I done as a leader? Well, I've always been a leader, even before I was a judge. I have sat on statewide organizations, including but not limited to, I have been a director for the State Bar of Texas. I have been president of the Mexican American Bar Association for the whole state of Texas. I have been regional director for the Texas Association of Defense Counsel. I have sat on numerous state bars, statewide CLEs, and have taught lawyers to be lawyers throughout the whole state of Texas, even before I became a judge. Since I became a judge, that leadership in me has continued to serve the people of Texas and the judiciary. I was appointed to the Texas Center for the Judiciary, which is the judicial education for judges, to be on the board. And I was then elected to be the chair of that. I was the first person from my South Texas area to be elected to chair, and that means the other judges, we have over 1,200 judges in the state of Texas, elected me to that position to run their judicial education. First time since 1992 that someone from South Texas held that position. I was the first female Hispanic to hold that position ever. So it's leadership roles. I took over a board that was very divided, that has, as we all know, funding issues, and we put together a very consistent board, and that education has now, I think, is now one of the best judicial educations we have in the country for our judges. And I know that because attendance rates for judicial conferences is increasing. I also have been asked by the State Bar of Texas to sit on several committees. So the State Bar leadership has always looked to me to sit on committees. And the Texas Supreme Court, which I am running for, also asked me, I sit on their request to the Texas Access for Justice Commission, which is the statewide board of directors which provides legal access for minorities and the poor in the state of Texas. We are second or third, depending on which numbers you look, at having more poor people in the state of Texas by federal regulations. We have over 6 million people that live in the state of Texas that live below the poverty level. And of the 6 million people, those who come and ask for legal help, we only provide legal help for less than 10%. And those are people that are just looking for help. And so legal services has always been dear to my heart. I started at U of H as a legal aid lawyer. So I think that one of the reasons I became a lawyer, when I talked to my dad back before I became a lawyer, is that I wanted people to have equalness. I don't think that's too much to ask. I don't think it's too much to ask that when we enter a courtroom, it doesn't matter where we came from or where we're going or whether we have money or don't have money in the bank account or what color our skin is or what race we are, but that we are all treated equally. And that means that the court has to have access to those who cannot afford a lawyer, because then it's not a justice system that we strive for in our Constitution and in this country. So leadership, I think, is important, and I think through my records, so just so you know, I was voted Latina Judge of the Year by the Hispanic Bar Association, the National Hispanic Bar Association in Puerto Rico, so that's a national, and this past year, the State Bar of Texas awarded me Judge of the Year. So I've received 2 accolades statewide and nationally for this position. So, so leadership. Oh wait, let me see. He hasn't done anything statewide. I can't think of it except being very superstar. So anyway, but you can look at his resume and look at it. So, but I think that you don't need to speculate. You have a leader in front of you that
he doesn't have any law background at all.
He does. He is a lawyer. He's been practicing law as long as I have. We're actually the same age and got out at the same time. But he's been mostly what we call a government lawyer, working both for Cornyn before he became a senator and for the Attorney General Abbott's office, and did some private practicing and did some litigation as well before Perry called him to ask him to.
But on one side or
Yes, I think that one of the things that is really important is as a Texas Supreme Court justice who's hearing the highest level of civil cases, is that what I call you have some trench work that you worked in. So when I first started practicing law, I was what was called a defense lawyer for 12 years, and which means I represented mostly corporate America, insurance companies and big corporations in lawsuits when they were being sued. And so I represented a lot of large corporations, but as well as small business owners when they were being sued through insurance policies that they may have had in their policies or did not have. So I did what was called insurance defense work and defense work for 12 years. And then I switched sides, as we say, in the legal work, and then I began suing corporate America. So I did 12 years of defending corporate America and 7 years of suing corporate America. What does that mean? That means that I've represented people in all walks of life. I've represented big corporations such as H-E-B, Whataburger, and Walmart, and big insurance companies like Pittsburgh Corning and ACS and State Farm and Farmers Insurance. But that also means that I've represented, Mr. Arungula, from Stark County, and I've represented the Gracias from Brownsville, or I've represented the small business owner CSC Wings from Brownsville, and walked them through trials. And that means that I have under my belt 34 jury verdicts. Win and loss, I have 34 jury verdicts under my belt. So I've been there holding people's hands when they've gone through trials, whether they were suing someone or being sued. And I think that when you're a Supreme Court justice, it's wonderful to see the paper in front of you, but those names are real people. And those corporations are real corporations. And you need to remember that. And I never forget that. Sonia Sotomayor says in one of her books, and I forget which one, when she was still a Court of Appeals before she got to the Texas Supreme Court, that every time she signed a judgment in a criminal case, that she never forgot that she was putting someone in jail and depriving them of liberty and life in, pursuant to the Constitution. That every time she signs her name to one of her judgments, she remembers that. And so every time I sign an opinion, and we have opinions that come out every Thursday, I have 12 of them coming out tomorrow, all of which I signed before I left. When I sign the opinion, I take a moment to remember that these are real people with real lives that I'm impacting them when I sign whatever opinion I'm signing. Whether it's taking someone's kids away, because we do parental termination, or a construction case where someone is trying to get their house fixed and it's not being fixed properly, or it is a family law matter, a custody fight, or a vote not, whatever it is, to you, it's the most important case. Yes, it's one of 500 opinions I may write a year or sign a year, but to you, it's only one, and I think that's important.
May I ask you?
Sure, of course. And
you just became very, very, very important to me when you said Sotomayor, when you cited Sotomayor. Her picture is on the face of the Crisis magazine that was started by W.E.B. Du Bois and is the signature piece of literature for the NAACP.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. No, she's when she got sworn in, I was sitting with my mom, and she, of course, had her mom there, and my mom and I both cried. I mean, that's just, it's a pretty amazing story. And those who came before, I don't take anything away from Justice Ruth Ginsburg, who also wrote an amazing dissent on that case, of which she had gotten more votes. But anyway, that's another discussion for another day. So, last and not least, I think that y'all need to know that the Supreme Court is important to you. there are real issues when people ask you, because I know that everybody in here is making phone calls, right?
Yes.
And walking the streets.
Yes.
And so when people ask you, why is this important to you? Why do I care who's the Supreme Court Justice? Well, let's start with currently sitting at the Texas Supreme Court are 2 gay marriage cases. So if that's an issue that's important to anybody that walks you tell them they're about to decide that issue. Okay? Now, I can't tell you because as a judge, we're not allowed to give opinions on cases that go before us. But those, when you are talking to people, say, these are issues. The 400-page opinion that was just written about the unconstitutional school district by the Austin judge goes straight to the Texas Supreme Court to review on whether it is constitutional, if that opinion is going to stand or not. So if education is important to you and you think that we don't have a constitutional funding, which is what a trial court has now found, and that this state is being sued by 600 school districts, that's going to be reviewed by a Texas Supreme Court. So ask them, is that an issue that's important to you? Water rights, they're huge in the state of Texas, and I know that our congressmen are talking about it all over the state. Those are being challenged and will be reviewed by Diana Henson on the Court of Appeals. That's why it's so important that she get elected, and why it's so important to have justices that understand those issues at the Texas Supreme Court. So I think that those are some of the issues that are important that you need to tell people why this race is also important along with all the other Democratic race. And when you talk to people, you can say, let's compare candidates. I will put up my resume against his resume any day of the year. If you want the short version, it's only 10 pages, but the long version is closer to a lot longer than 10 pages. I can't seem to get it shorter than 3 pages, no matter how hard I try. So I started, as I started campaigning right after Sam and I got elected. And I thought, well, I've run in 20 counties. What's 254 counties, right? A big piece of cake. Well, it's a really big cake, guys. It's a lot more than I think you ever realize until you're actually driving and driving and driving and driving. But, so I know that I can't be everywhere. So I have to count on you. I will make a promise to you for the next 62 days. Sam and I will not do anything but campaign. He drives, and I'm on the phone, and I'm on texting, and we are setting up schedules and meeting people and shaking hands, and we are doing everything we can. And I know that we can do. But I need the same commitment from all of you today, because that's the only way I become your next Texas Supreme Court Justice on November 4th. Is that all of us here make a promise to each other that we are going to be totally exhausted on November the 4th at 8. But we will go to bed knowing that we did everything and that we will be victorious on that evening. Yes. So I don't want to take too much of your time because I know everybody's on a time. So if you have any other questions, I'm here to answer any questions.
Judge, one thing I never hear any discussion about, and I think this is a real important issue in Texas. You go to a criminal trial, you're found guilty, you are sentenced to 10 years to 99 years. That's your sentence. There is no way on appeal to review an overly severe sentence. What do you think about that, realizing that that has nothing to do with your new job?
Well, it's two things. It's unfortunate that we do not have any candidates in the contested Court of Criminal Appeals cases because there were 3 positions up, and because most recently the Court of Criminal Appeals has decided we used to be able to review criminal cases on a factual sufficiency and had at least some leeway on some sentencing issues, but they have closed that loop the Court of Criminal Appeals. So what you have just discussed has even become more difficult to review now on sentencing and ranges and enhancements. And for those who do not know, we have certain sentencing guidelines, and without making any kind of opinion of one way or another, we have the 3 strikes you're out. And so just to give you kind of the way it works, sometimes if there's been several felony convictions, and then the last one, for example, just one that comes to the top of my head is he had 2 felony convictions, then he got caught with some drugs. All of his convictions were nonviolent, because violent crimes are treated differently than nonviolent crimes, of course, and rightfully so. But he ended up being sentenced to 99 years for nonviolence because of the enhancements and because of the 3 felonies. There are murder cases that go through our courtroom where they get 20 and 30 years. And so, there's nothing we can do as long as we continue to have a Court of Criminal Appeals that has ruled accordingly, and or until we allow trial judges to have a little more discretionary rules. It's even worse in the federal system, even though they have laxed a little bit on the sentencing guidelines in federal law. Yes, sir.
I don't know if you can advocate for different positions, like are you pro or against the death penalty, or, I think in our society as a whole, we're putting a lot of minorities in jail, over represented amount, and people, kids for marijuana go to jail for a long time. What are your positions on death penalty?
Well, you're right. The Code of Judicial Conduct doesn't allow me to take a stand on any position one way or another. The Court of Appeals, we do hear criminal cases, and we hear all criminal cases on the appellate court. The Texas Supreme Court, our Supreme Courts have been divided. The criminal cases go one way, and the civil cases go to the Texas Supreme Court. We don't hear death penalty cases. They go straight from the trial court to the Court of Criminal Appeals and go around the Court of Appeals, and go around any of the appellate courts. There is a real issue that we deal with in the criminal. With that being said, there are some real issues that we have to address that I've never been involved in, but there are several issues that are dealt with of rehab versus punishment, and there's a whole ideology that occurs, and there's a lot of statistics and studies that are being done in that area. One of the things that I do want to address, though, is that the judiciary itself, and the Texas Center for the Judiciary, which I was chair of, we are trying to implement different programs, and 2 of them that I'm going to address are veterans courts and mental health courts. And veterans courts are courts that are specifically for veterans, and we now have them in almost all major cities, and now we're going out. We just got our first one in Brownsville, and we have one in Hidalgo. We've had it for 2 years, where they still have to serve their time, but we put them together with veteran groups and socials and try to get them back on track, almost like a shock probation. I'm sorry, it's called veterans courts.
Where is that?
Well, what it is that if there's a veteran that's been in criminal trouble, the possession of drugs.
I'm sorry. What's the difference between a veteran and
The veterans court, the difference between veterans court is that after they've been found guilty and are going through a probation, their probation intertwines them with veterans benefits and veterans, it literally, they sit around a table, and it's not only his probation department, but there's someone from the veterans benefits there, there's someone from a local veteran that has gone through the system in order to rehab them, as opposed to just putting them through. We have a different way. The probation's still the same. As a matter of fact, most of them will say that the probation is harder for the veterans because they're kept a closer eye, but it's almost like a shock probation. We have the same thing for mental health. If the issue is mental health, then it doesn't really do us any good to just put them in jail. We have to address the underlying problem, which is mental health. So we have mental health courts as well, where we put the issue. And the reason I address those two is because if we're trying to do something about whether they belong in prison and how long they belong in prison, I have to know that there's an underlying issue that maybe we need to address, that prison is not the answer for them. And I think that we owe some due respect to our veterans who have come back. You know, we just toured Fort Hood. You know, just my heart is still pitter-pattering from what we just saw at Fort Hood and what these men and women have done for our country and what we put them through. And then there's been a lot of studies about them coming back and trying to transition them back as civilians. And I've talked to several mental health and the difficulty of that when they've been on high alert and for so many years of transitioning back to. So the Veterans Court is a way that the judiciary is trying to address that issue as well. As opposed to just, oh, they committed a crime, it's their third strike, 99 years, let's go. Yes.
I'd like to get you there seems to be no standard across the board. In Texas, we had that 16-year-old white kid who got drunk, killed
Yes.
4 people, got probation. We
Yes.
have a kid in Killeen, got drunk, ran over a few people in Austin. I can guarantee you he's not going to get probation.
Right.
The contrast, black and white, is so unfair, it seems, coming out of the judicial system. Can that be corrected at the Supreme Court?
It can't not be corrected, unfortunately. I mean, I'm just going to give you the answer. The answer is no. The answer can't be corrected at our level or the Court of Criminal Appeals. That's something that a legislature or Congress needs to correct, with the understanding that, you know, the federal system went to federal sentencing guidelines and took away some of the guidelines to federal judges, and then you got to be very careful when you give those guidelines. But you know, most judges have ranges of probation all the way to 99 years. You know, could be a way to corner them and factors, but my position would not have any.
I think what Gary was alluding to is the fact that one was black and one was white.
Without a doubt. And that goes back to the Texas Access for Justice Commission and making sure that a
But I
judicial
don't
statement.
think we can make a judgment on that.
I can't make a judgment on that, but I think that one of the things that I can't do is that we have to ensure that everybody has representation, no matter their
Good
gender, the
representation.
race, right, good representation, which, you know, they don't, and those who do not have. Can you get your second? Yes.
I just have a quick question. I was just wondering what you would say to that statement or argument that judges shouldn't legislate from the bench or what the Constitution says.
I think that there have been a lot of articles written about our Texas Supreme Court and that it is a judicial activist court. That our current Texas Supreme Court does exactly that they're legislating from the bench. I don't think that you should be legislating from the bench. I've been at the legislature, that's what they are supposed to be doing. So as a judge, we should be limited to what is in front of us, what the record reflects in front of us, and what the law is in front of us, and not be dictated neither by politics, nor by money, nor by ideology. You know, we take an oath when we are sworn in as judges, and I take that oath very seriously. There's a lot of things that I may or may not believe as a personal bias. We all have them. But as a judge, I'm obligated to follow the laws of the state of Texas as they exist now. And I have written in opinions, this is a stupid law, but it is the law and I must follow it. I wrote a concurrent on Herrera, which was an ex facto, and I said, this is stupid. I did the same thing in Ballesteros. But I will make my opinion noted, but I will follow the law. There are some crazy laws out there that we need to take care of, legislatures, but that is not our position as judges to do so. Yes, ma'am.
I was curious, you were talking about, mentally ill criminals and the Veterans Court. Am I correct? What do we do with them? Because I don't believe we really have the facilities here for criminally mentally ill. And,
They end up in jail in your rural areas.
yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And so they're really not being treated.
No, they're not. They're, most of your urban areas do have the mental facilities to take care of them. But unfortunately, most of the rural areas, and since, I always try to, coming from a rural area, even Corpus in the valley, I always try to speak for the rural areas, because the big cities can take care of themselves, can't they? So they don't. They just end up in jail.
So essentially, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're found guilty criminally or guilty by reason of insanity, you're gonna end up in the same place in a rural county?
No, if you're
Okay.
found, because if you're found, you can't be found. You're found not guilty by
Right.
criminal
Okay.
insanity. So what you end up is actually in a state institution. But there are a lot of those who are found guilty, but still have a mental disorder. The law says that you can be mentally ill and still be convicted of a crime. That happens every day, all day long.
It's the DMSV.
Right, the DMV. You can be a bipolar disorder, but the law recognizes that if you recognize that that's wrong and you still did it, you're still mentally competent, then you can still be found guilty and still serve the time. So we have a huge population of mentally ill. Also, we have a whole criminal basis also, that the underlying problems are alcohol, drugs, and what I would call other behavioral disorders, anger management. So, that's a whole nother area of law, going back to, do we rehab or do we just punish them? So, nothing which has to do with any of the position I'm running for this year. But, something I addressed with, and something I'm familiar with, because I've been a judge for 7 years, so. Yes, sir.
What is the future of voter ID law in Texas, in your opinion? What does it look like it's going to be?
I can't give you an opinion. I wish I
Right,
could.
yeah.
Especially since she's videotaping. Just kidding.
There's such a thing as editing.
I think that you have a great federal judge in Judge Nella Gonzalez Ramos, who started hearing evidence yesterday in Corpus Christi, which is my hometown. I've known Judge Gonzalez Ramos for years and is a good friend and very well. She will hear the evidence and I have no doubt follow the law. So I don't really know, because it's really hard. I hear what's in the paper, you hear what's in the paper, but she's actually going to hear testimony. Experts testify and a lot of statistical information. So I'm not sure where it's going to go out, other than we'll definitely get an opinion out of a great judge, and I'm very excited that it's her in Corpus Christi hearing the case.
Okay, I feel a little bit.
She's a good judge. She's a good judge.
Yes, really good integrity.
I have a question. I arrived here about 3 years ago from Oregon.